All images shot in this video were digital, shot on a digital camera, and edited with a film simulation plugin called Dehancer. And the labels I throw up on the screen will just indicate the main settings I used inside Dehancer, be it a preset or something I built from scratch. But more on all this in just a second. Can digital photos look like film photos? Is that a thing that's even possible? And if it is, how? And in what way? And why? What does a film photo even look like? These questions and more are the ones that I fully anticipate will not be answered by the time I conclude this video, nor my lifetime, but that have been on my mind a lot lately. I'm pretty simple in my approach to most things. Photography is no exception. Thankfully, there are people doing real science behind the scenes, making it possible for me to just choose a medium, a camera, a lens, go shoot, get incredible results. I mean, I'm not complimenting myself. I just mean that cameras are amazing. Software is amazing. Hardware is amazing. Be it film, digital. When I do bad work, it's entirely my fault. But I shoot film like half the time. And when I'm working with film, I kind of go out of my way to allow the images to look as filmy as they possibly can by embracing dust and hairs and scratches that the negatives pick up, including them in the scan, because to me, otherwise, they just look like photos. And I think in some sense I'm looking for like some kind of cosmic brownie points for shooting on film. Sometimes I find myself thinking that an image is special because of the medium rather than the content of the image. And although I can fall into this trap sometimes, I have an awareness of how silly that is, and that I'm just fooling myself. Here's the deal. I agree film looks special in many cases. I really, really do feel that. But I also have this other side of me where I realize that 50% of that is some kind of pre-programmed nostalgia trigger that has no basis in reality. Nevertheless, I feel it, and I can only go by what I feel when attempting to do art. The other 50% is real. I mean, most of what one encounters day to day is certainly digital, and thus film characteristics, even if only perceived subconsciously, certainly must pop out as special to our brains. And of course, even more so if film was the dominant medium throughout your childhood. Again, that's my problem. That's what makes me go all giddy for film. But film as a medium has strengths and it has weaknesses, and digital has strengths and weaknesses, advantages and disadvantages. But we tend to want to hide the flaws of digital and at the same time amplify the flaws of film. But of course, if I'm not describing you, that's because I'm not describing you. No need to take it personally. Rest assured, I'm only ever describing me. But who can understand why we react to the things that we react to in the ways that we do? Hey, Miyako. My kitty cat's here. Maybe somebody someday, but not me and not today. Satan. But when I was asked by Dehancer to review Dehancer, I had to give it some thought. I wasn't actually sure that I wanted to. I wasn't sure that my approach to photography, but also video making, would be conducive to, or would result in a useful review. And why would I want my digital images to look like film anyway? Some dumb purist type thought like that popped into my head. Well, of course I already attempt to do exactly that, if I'm being honest with myself. With my editing. Not always, but often. That's likely not anyone's goal anyway. Nobody's looking to fool anyone, I suspect. Nor is that likely the goal of any software developer. What I came to realize is that yes, I do want to take the opportunity to review Dehancer for my own sake, because I've become very stagnant in my workflow with digital images. The editing part of it anyway. I'm looking for a way to shake things up, and here it is. So I locked myself away in a room with Dehancer for a couple of weeks, editing some old photos, some new ones, learning to use the thing. And ultimately, at the end of this process, I find that I love it. I love working in Dehancer. I'm very happy with the results. At first, though, I was annoyed with it, but that's just my personality. And I know that about myself. I get annoyed with everything. But fortunately for me, I soldiered on, and within a relatively short amount of time, I felt I was pretty competent with Dehancer, pretty comfortable with it. But then came the real test. I tried going back to my old tools, Lightroom alone. And losing something is always a better test of what you value. That's one of the harsh realities of life, and I found myself feeling awkwardly restrained, unhappy with the results. I wanted my daddy's records back. But do the images come out looking like film? No, not really. I mean, maybe. I don't really feel qualified to judge. I'm pretty sure that's just not my goal, and I'm not even able to think that way. You be the judge. I just want them to look good and be able to crank them out relatively quickly. So forget the film angle. Do they look good editing-wise? I mean, that's subjective, but I think so. I'm extremely pleased. I notice a big step up in quality in terms of my own goals and expectations. Lame photography aside, I dig very much the editing possibilities and results I get in Dehancer. I absolutely intend to continue using it, forsaking Lightroom presets and things of the sort going forward. Okay, let's get granular, baby. I've just switched to decaf coffee. It's pretty rough. Here's the raw file directly out of camera with Dehancer's recommended settings already applied. In this case, though, I am going to crank the exposure down even more than recommended because it's kind of a bright photo. And it seems you get better results when you start with something dark and log profile-esque. Because here's the sad reality. The one thing that's not nitpicky, like, oh, I wish a button were in a different place. Here's the one thing about Dehancer that truly bugs me. And that is that we're not going to be working with a raw file. Maybe that's just a technological limitation. That I know it works exactly the same way when you click the Edit in Photoshop button. Right here. I don't know why this is forever stuck at beta. I don't even use the beta. We're doing the same with editing in Dehancer, and that sucks. So we'll be editing a TIFF, and I would certainly prefer to continue editing a raw file throughout the whole process. But one must certainly go with results over some bias for some file extension that they prefer. A great way to get an edit going super quickly is to come over to presets, find something kind of close, and then further dial it in from there with your settings over on the right. You can even at some point, if you find that you've gone down the wrong road or something, you can actually switch out film profiles underneath while retaining all these settings. And that can be extremely useful. But we're not going to do that. Let's build a look from scratch. In my first couple of days working in Dehancer, I did a lot of just scrolling through film profiles, and there are tons to choose from. A lot of subtle ones, which I appreciate. Some over-the-top ones, which, even with those, even though it's not my taste, I've found that some of those really have value because I'll start with that profile and then sort of tweak and get them a little less extreme. But I have something in mind, which is ectochrome. Yep, and I figured that would look good just based on some past experiences with this type of portrait. So I am pretty happy with that look straight out of the gate, but I do want to add grain and potentially bloom. Let's start with bloom. Actually, that I don't even think I need to dial that in particular, but I think I'm pleased with that as is. Cool. I'm really impressed with the grain in Dehancer. True to the claim I read in the documentation, it really does look as though the image is literally made from the grain, as it would be with film, rather than grain being an afterthought, something overlaid on top. That's one of the fundamental flaws with adding grain in Lightroom, and I suspect elsewhere. And okay, easy enough to claim something like that. I didn't just take it on faith, but I've done the experiment, and I am now convinced. Look at the before and after. Really cuts through that characteristic digital sharpness, if you wanted to. Don't mean to pick on Lightroom, but I never found the grain particularly convincing, because the sharpness of the digital image, with good lenses, good camera body, would undermine what I was trying to accomplish with the grain. There would be a mismatch between the grain and the image sharpness. It would just be sharper than film could possibly be with that amount of visible grain. Still need something to make this pop a little more. Maybe a touch of contrast. Maybe this film compression. It's pretty interesting. Easy to overdo and end up with a flat image, but if you're careful and subtle, it's nice. It plays with the difference between highlights and their maximum highlightiness. That is the technical term. The documentation is extremely helpful. I referred to it a lot, or I did, my first couple days, but it is also fun just to play around, and ultimately doesn't matter what the tool is designed to do, only matters how it looks when deployed in your image. I feel like I'm detecting some ugly color spill on her skin. I'm actually colorblind, so I struggle with that, so any kind of screw up in that space is entirely my fault, not the fault of any software. Just my eyes don't work. Sucks. But I've only been allowing myself to edit each photo one time, even if I see something I want to go back and change, because otherwise I'll just end up getting stuck in an endless cycle of redoing work. Also, I think it's better to just demo this in that way. I get one crack at it, and it just looks the way it looks. There are, after all, a lot of options inside of Dehancer, and I'm just trying to represent as wide a variety as I possibly can. But for anyone who can answer that question I posed before, what does a film image look like? Perhaps you well could replicate that look in Dehancer. I can't answer that question, and therefore I don't feel like I can replicate film, or that I should even try. But I'm pleased to just let these images be their own thing, and I really like them for what they are. I don't require any kind of certified 100% film-like label in order to be happy. I'm reminded a little bit of the uncanny valley problem in computer graphics, where the more you approach replicating a human face, the more it fails to feel like a human face. But if instead you make it look like something very different, an alien or a creature or something, it can be extremely convincing. Or if you employ some other kind of artistic dividing point. Working around limitations is actually a really good thing. When creativity is necessary, it's almost guaranteed to happen, and when it's not, it often doesn't. But let's quickly go back in time, look at something out of sequence. I set this image downtown aside because I thought it could demonstrate the grain better than a face could. Not an amazing image or anything, just a really good example. Because there's all this detail here. And let me kind of dial in the grain the way I like it. Actually, first, let's add a little bloom. I am a fan of the bloom. Okay, that may be too much, but I'm gonna go with that for the time being. Come back over to grain. So, I like to increase the amount, decrease the resolution. That's way too much visible grain though. So, I crank it down, especially in highlights and shadows. Leave a little bit more in midtones. That's how I like to do it. And see how everything's kind of soft, but in the real image, it's incredibly sharp. Like too sharp, obnoxiously sharp. So to finish it off, I just messed with a few more things, starting with getting the bloom to a more reasonable level. Then I look in the print section, tweak the color, having nothing to do with editing. I can't decide if I like this photo or not. Strange. It like bores me and interests me at the same time. When I'm not working for a client to go out and shoot something, but I choose to go out with my camera anyway, for no money, that's sacred time. I'm not going to spend it doing tedious stuff. I'm going to spend it having as much fun as possible. So I felt like that was the way in which I could review this product. I'll just go shoot. Always looking for an excuse to go shoot. Be out in nature. Use my camera. Be creative. Look with discerning eyes at things that I might ordinarily not notice at all. And then come home and edit them with a brand new tool. All of that was great fun. I had a blast doing this. So let me wrap up my thoughts on the Lightroom plugin version of Dehancer for still images. For Mac OS, Windows, I use both. I'm not a platform snob. It's great. I really liked it. I wasn't blown away by it. But it's good. I'm getting better results now than I was before. I just lament the fact that there's no RAW support. And of course I have no idea the technological hurdles that have to be crossed to make that happen. My dream version of Dehancer would be that it's not a plugin, that it's a standalone app, and that it works directly with RAW files. But maybe that's not even a goal of the developer, and I suppose you have to respect that. But I loved working in Dehancer and plan to continue doing so. And speaking of standalone apps, funny I should bring that up. So here we go. This is the most fun I've had in a long time. A ridiculous amount of fun, actually. I was using this versatile little camera, perhaps you've heard of it. It's called My Phone. Turns out Dehancer does have a standalone app, it's just for mobile, specifically iPhone and iPad. And it's great for editing stills. For video, yes, it also color grades video. I'm gonna say less so. Good in theory, but leaving something to be desired. For photos, I'm all over it. That was great fun, editing my shots on location as I'm taking them. Okay, but why am I complaining about editing video in Dehancer on my iPhone? Two reasons really, which kinda can be compiled into one reason, and that one reason is lack of options when exporting. Maybe that doesn't sound like a big deal, but, well, for example, I'm using a third-party camera app to capture video on my iPhone. The stock app gives me 31.5 megabits per second. So with this third-party app, I can push that to just over 50. I have to do this because otherwise when I cut the video together with my GoPro video, which is shooting at a lovely 120 megabits per second, it looks noticeably worse, like really not good. Dehancer is giving me an appalling 22.6 megabits per second, so directly out of Dehancer it already kind of looks like mud. That's why I didn't show it full screen. I feel it just ultimately reflects poorly on me to present mud. The video is already compressed when you shoot it. It gets compressed again when you run it through Dehancer. It gets compressed again when you upload it to social media of some kind. And in my case, it gets compressed another time because I put all these clips together in Final Cut, and then I have to render that. So, huge thumbs down on video. I know that this product is not designed with me in mind. They have a desktop plugin for color grading. That's more geared for someone who would notice or care the things I'm talking about. But nevertheless, thumbs down video, thumbs up photos. Photos all the way around, great experience. But I had a blast taking photos on my phone. What a capable camera. That was a revelation to me. I want to do more of this.